So our topic this afternoon is the division of labor and social order. This is an immensely important topic for Mises. If you just flip through human action, the page that you arrive at just randomly is likely to mention the division of labor or cooperation, peaceful cooperation, something about the social nexus, the social economy. So it pervades his entire treatise on economics. So it's extremely important. You also saw that it was mentioned in Dr. Herbiter's lecture right before lunch. And he sort of hinted at it. He talked about the social economy and the division of labor. And what we're going to do in this lecture is elaborate on it. See, why is it so important for Mises? What makes the division of labor more productive? Why does Mises refer to it as society or civilization itself? So those are the sorts of things that we'll be covering. Before we get into it, though, I just want to contrast Mises's view of the division of labor with some common views about the market economy that you often see on the left. You see people say that the market economy is this dog-eat-dog world. It's by nature. It's people having conflicts with one another. It's violence. You hear this sort of terminology. But that is, the exact opposite of how Mises and Austrian economists look at the market economy and the division of labor. In fact, the division of labor is peaceful cooperation. Instead of people, using violence to acquire what they want from other people, so like going over and, bonking them on the head and taking their stuff, instead we cooperate with them peacefully and we trade with them. So there's this expectation of mutual benefit. So I expect that by you giving me what you have, and I give you what I have, we'll both be better off as a result. We both prefer the thing that we're getting over the thing that we're giving up. And so this yields, or at least tends towards, cooperation in the longer run. It's not just a one-off sort of thing, but if I see or anticipate that other people will be producing things that I want, or they'll have things that I want, and then I might have an incentive to produce things that they want so that we can keep trading with one another, which means that we don't just get this one-off trade that results in mutual benefit, but we actually get long-lasting social cooperation. We get long-lasting relationships between persons that are beneficial and also increase our standards of living, make us better off. Okay, so you might know that I like children's books. I've written 3 on different economic concepts like the broken window fallacy, Austrian business cycle theory. And I thought maybe I would write one about the division of labor, but lo and behold, there already is one. There's a classic by Richard Scarry called What Do People Do All Day? And it shows what people do all day in busy town, right? So they have different jobs, they do different things. And I'll show you some examples from this book. But it just goes to show the fact that this was an appropriate topic for a classic and very popular children's book shows that this is something that's fundamental. It's something that's like very basic to us. The idea that we specialize, the idea that we choose a career, we choose a job and do that job and then trade with other people. We earn some sort of income by the things that are produced by others. This is something that's almost second nature to us. It's something that we definitely take for granted, but as we'll see later on in the presentation, we shouldn't take it for granted. It's something that we participate in every day, all day, or maybe not all day, because like Professor Herbner said, there is a personal economy. But whenever we're encountering other people in the market and trading with them, it means that we're making use of the division of labor. Okay, so some definitions. I'll define the division of labor as individuals specializing in particular tasks with the intent to trade. So that's important. Both parts of that definition are important. So we're specializing, meaning that we're doing one particular thing. As opposed to trying to produce everything that we want to consume, we decide to specialize. We narrow our focus. We narrow our efforts into producing one particular thing, or even participating in one step of the production of a particular thing. As the division of labor extends and permeates an entire structure of production. So there's that specialization aspect, but there's also that intent to trade, and that's an important element of the division of labor, because if there wasn't that intent to trade, then there wouldn't be a reason for me to specialize. Because I like to consume a variety of goods, right? It means that if I were to be self-sufficient, if I were to be isolated and not participate in this division of labor, if I wanted to do that, it means that I would have to produce my own food, my own shelter, my own medicine, the things that I need to survive. And even that, it's unlikely that I would be able to do that on my own, right? So, brutal standard of living. However, I specialize in a particular job because I intend to trade the outcome. I intend to trade that product with other people so that I can get from them that variety of goods that I was just speaking about. So the specialization can only occur if there's that intention or that expectation that you'll be able to acquire the variety of goods that you desire from other people. And the other part of the title is social order. And if you look through the different ways that Mises uses this term in Human Action, when he's talking about social order, what he's describing is a set of institutions usually centered around the institution's respect for or neglect for private property, and the social order also refers to the outcome of that. So whether or not we have a harmony or disharmony of interest between the people. In Mises's case is that if you have private property, then people can engage in economic calculation, they can specialize with the intent to trade, therefore we have a division of labor, and that results in this social harmony, this harmony of interest where I'm getting what I want out of the market, and you're also getting what you want out of the market, and we're all better off as a result, and everybody's, peacefully cooperating. Okay, so like I said, Mises often equates the division of labor with society or civilization. So just one example of that is, he says on page 143, so quite early on in Human Action, society is division of labor and combination of labor. Okay, so let's take a closer look at Richard Scarry's division of labor in Busytown. So I'm sure you can't read all the text there, but we've got some workers work indoors, some work outdoors, some work up in the sky, some work underground. Some workers always do their work at the same place. Others travel from place to do their jobs. And so we get these pictures of a bunch of different characters in Busytown doing different jobs. He says everyone is a worker, and he goes through this example of farmer Alfalfa, who on his farm produces some fruits and vegetables. He sells the fruits and vegetables to Grocer Cat there in the bottom left. And then the Grocer Cat specializes in selling these for retail customers, right? So farmer Alfalfa doesn't spend his time trying to sell it to the final buyers of the fruits and vegetables. He spends his time, he specializes in farming, and then somebody else in Busytown specializes in selling his product to others in the community. We got people doing blacksmithing. Talks about Grocer Cat buying a dress for his mother or her mother. So everybody's doing different things in this economy. And so I know this is, sort of childish to look at, but this is what we do all day, right? So that's the title of the book. What do people do all day? This is what we do. We all specialize in a particular task. And as a result of that, we group together, or actually it's not just a result, but it's a prerequisite and a result that we group together in communities. And so that's what Mises means by the division of labor is human civilization. So why do we group together? And it's because we recognize this greater productivity of the division of labor. Okay, another quote from Mises. We owe the origin and development of human society and consequently of culture and civilization to the fact that work performed under the division of labor is more productive than when performed in isolation. So like I said, the opposite of the division of labor is isolation. It's me trying to be self-sufficient. Another opposite, can you have three things that are opposite to each other? I don't know, ask David Gordon. So one opposite is trying to be self-sufficient. That's Robinson Crusoe, alone on his island, producing what he needs. And so his consumption is, or his production is his consumption, right? There's no intent to trade because there's nobody to trade with, at least until somebody else arrives on the island. But the other opposite, the other thing that's not the division of labor is this perpetual conflict. It's when people, instead of viewing each other as other people who are capable of producing and who own their own property and can trade with us for mutual benefit, we view them as somebody we can aggress against, somebody we can commit violence against to acquire the things that we want. And so that's why Mises emphasizes the peacefulness of cooperation in the division of labor. In the earlier quote, you might have noticed that Mises said division and combination of labor. And so there's an interesting example of both in Richard Scarry's book. So we have division of labor. That's what I referenced with farmer alfalfa, and then he sells the produce to the grocer cat. So they're each doing different tasks. However, also in the book, he's got this example of different individuals cooperating, working together in a lumber yard. And so we have the lumberjack cutting down the tree. The branches are cut off of the tree trunk. The tree trunk is sawed into logs. And notice that there's two people here. So even for like a very particular task, there's a way to combine labor. So notice you need two people to operate that saw to go back and forth, right? So that's what Mises means by combination of labor. So we get peaceful cooperation, not just with pure specialization, but also we realize we can work together and increase our productivity in certain tasks. If it makes sense, we can work together and oftentimes using specific capital goods to increase our productivity in that task. Okay, now in my classes, the way that I introduce the division of labor is with this ham sandwich model of the economy. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of the details here, but the idea is that if you consider the production of a single good, like a ham sandwich, and all of the things that were required to produce, all the steps that had to be taken to produce the ham sandwich, you start to realize that there's this vast division of labor behind it. There's a vast structure of production behind it, where there are people doing different jobs, different entrepreneurs, making different anticipations about what's going to happen in the future, what will consumer demand be for the ham sandwich or for any other of the intermediate goods in the process. And what you see is this very complex network of exchanges, which is how the Austrian economists views the market economy. Now, this is just with one good, right? One simple good. There's a similar exercise in iPencil by Leonard Reed showing all the complexity of producing a pencil. And the point is to show that this is something that we definitely take for granted. It's easy to forget the complexity of the division of labor. I think I just Googled complexity or network or something and got this image. So it's not like I actually spent the time to create this. But this is the idea. It's like our market economy is this very complex division of labor where people are specialized in doing different tasks. And it's arranged in a structure of production. So it's not just chaos for the sake of chaos. It's not like this is just some benign result of the market economy, but it is organized, it is ordered, and it's directed towards the production of consumer goods, things that consumers want. And just very quickly, the way that we can see that, if you take this network sort of thing, this web, and you organize things by time or stages of production, then you get something that looks like this, which, if you're familiar with Man, Economy, and State, especially Figure 32, that's how Rothbard depicts an early version of the stages of production or the structure of production. So this is something that applies to all of the different goods in the economy. We can think about it in this very complex way, or we can think about it in the stages of production. This is what economists have latched onto, is something that it's a heuristic or it's a diagram that we can use to talk about other things, especially if you start to calculate the spending in each stage of production, then you can talk about the natural rate of interest and so on. Okay, but now let's answer the question, why or how is the division of labor so productive? And I have a simple example involving Crusoe and Friday. So we'll start off with Crusoe here. So suppose Crusoe can collect 2 coconuts per hour or catch half of a fish per hour. That doesn't mean that the fish falls apart when he tries to catch it. It takes 2 hours to catch one. That's what I mean there. So those are his production possibilities. If you look on the right-hand side, this is what in many economics textbooks they would refer to that as a production possibilities frontier. What are the different combinations of fish and coconuts that Crusoe can produce using his labor? And so after 8 hours, you could either have 16 coconuts, so 8 hours applied to producing coconuts, or 4 fish, right? So, and then if he divides up his time outside of those extremes, but decides to spend half the time producing coconuts and half the time producing fish, then he would be somewhere on that boundary. So that this shows the boundary of his own production possibilities. And so in this case, if he divides his time in half, suppose that's just his preferences, he's okay with having 8 coconuts and 2 fish at the end of the day, this would be the result. Notice he's limited by his own production possibilities. There's no intent to trade at this point. Okay, and then there's this other person, Friday. Friday has the opposite production costs, the opposite labor time required to produce these two different goods. And so for Friday, Friday can collect half a coconut per hour or catch 2 fish per hour. And so Friday's production possibilities looks like this: either a maximum of 4 coconuts if all of the time is allocated to coconut collection, or a maximum of 16 fish if all of his time is dedicated to fish production. If he splits his time in half, we get 2 and 8. Okay, so where things get interesting is when they see each other. Maybe they see each other's production possibilities. They see how long it takes the other person to produce something. They see how many fish and coconuts they each bring to their respective huts at the end of the workday. And maybe they start to think, well, I wonder if there's, instead of us just producing what we consume or only consuming what we produce, what if we decide to work together? What if we decide to change our production in a way that increases total production between the two of us? That's the idea. So they see each other's production possibilities. They had this idea that they could trade with one another, and as a result of trading, maybe, we'll see, if it works out, they'll be able to both of them consuming more coconuts and fish. And it's not something that's like immediately obvious. You've got to work through the example to see like how it happens. But this is the foundation for the greater productivity of the division of labor and therefore civilization itself. So let's see how it might happen. Okay, so what if Crusoe goes towards coconut production and Friday goes towards fish production? So they decide to totally specialize. Crusoe only for coconuts, Friday only for fish. And what that means is Crusoe is producing 0 fish and Friday is producing 0 coconuts. So they've moved all the way to the extreme of their production possibilities. Remember, they only do this with the intent to trade. Crusoe does not want 16 coconuts. He wants some fish as well. Friday does not just want fish. Friday also wants some coconuts. So they're not doing this with the intent to consume everything that they produce. They're doing it with the intent to trade some of that so that they can get what the other person has produced. Okay, so here's what that might look like. So at the end of the 8-hour workday, Crusoe has 16 coconuts. Friday has 16 fish. Now watch the orange dots. There's going to be some moving coconuts and moving fish, but watch the orange dots. So notice when Crusoe gives, I'm going to say that he trades 7 for 7 coconuts over to Friday, there's going to be a reduction in Crusoe's coconut stockpile and an increase in Friday's stockpile. So take a close look. That's what it looks like. So just half the trade, coconuts have gone one direction. Notice that now Crusoe is well inside of his PPF, but it's not the end of the story. And Friday is well outside of his PPF, but it's not the end of the story. They still have to trade the 7 fish. And when that happens, they end up with a combination of these two goods. And notice, so this is the result of their trade. Their ability to consume is now well beyond their respective production possibilities. And this is the mind-blowing aspect of the division of labor. It's that it didn't seem obvious, right, that this sort of thing could happen, but they could increase total production by specializing in their comparative advantage, by specializing in the good in which they are the lowest opportunity cost producer. So you can see that with Crusoe. Crusoe, again, is on the left. He does not forego many fish by producing coconuts. You just see that by the slope of the line. So when Crusoe decides to produce 1 additional coconut, there's not that much of a decrease in fish production as a result. And likewise for Friday, when Friday decides to produce more fish, there's not much of a decrease in coconut production because they're not very good at producing those 2 different goods. So that's what guided them. We'll see how it works in a monetary economy. That's what guided them towards producing the thing in which they are the lowest opportunity cost producer. And that is the source of these gains from trade. But like I said, it's mind-blowing. Now, another mind-blowing aspect of the division of labor is that everyone has a spot in the division of labor. So based on the way that we set this example up, I just reversed their production trade-offs. Notice like their intercepts are opposite of each other, 16 and 2, 2 and 16, or excuse me, 4 and 16, 16 and 4. So I just reversed it, and so it's very obvious who should produce what, just based on the numbers as I presented them. But there's a law of economics championed by Mises. It was originally formulated, discovered by David Ricardo, called the law of association. And this, in my opinion, is the closest thing that economists have to something that could go on a Hallmark card. It's the idea that everybody has a spot in the division of labor. No matter who you are, you can be a productive member of society. It's like all the other things that economists say are like reminding people of scarcity and opportunity costs. But hey, the law of association is this nice rosy thing. Put that on a card. So here's where Mises is explaining the proof of the law of association. So how could it be that somebody who is not very productive in producing all goods, and we'll restrict it to 2 goods, Mises restricts it to 2 goods. How can it be that somebody who's not very productive in producing both of those goods, could they still benefit from participating in division of labor? So Mises says if A is in such a way more efficient than B that he needs for the production of 1 unit. Okay, let's simplify this. Okay, so I've simplified Mises' example for you. So there's 2 people, A and B, and they're producing P and Q. So the goods are P and Q and the people are A and B. A can produce 1 P in 3 hours. For B, it takes 5 hours. So B is the inferior producer. A can produce 1 unit of Q in 2 hours. For B, it takes 4. So notice that for both goods, it takes B longer to produce both goods. And what Mises is going to show is that even in this case, both A and B can benefit. There's a spot for B to participate in a division of labor such that they both benefit. You might think, just like with the previous example, it wasn't immediately obvious how total production could increase between Crusoe and Friday. This is even less obvious, right? It seems like A is going to be dragged down by B. A is going to have to, let's make a sacrifice if he is going to help finance some of B's consumption. Okay, so with isolation, Mises says they split 120 hours evenly between P and Q. With those production trade-offs, A can produce 20 P and 30 Q. B can produce 12 P and 15 Q. Total production, so add up both of them, is 32 P and 45 Q. Then they decide to participate in a division of labor. And so the way Mises has it set up is that they both totally specialize. So A only produces Q and B only produces P. Total production after they specialize, just count up total amounts of P and Q, 24 P and 60 Q. And then Mises does this sort of interesting thing where he refers to the substitution ratio of P and Q. It's sort of unlike Mises to do this sort of thing. And so I've got a translation, or maybe a better way to see how there are gains from trade between A and B in this case. But he says that based on this substitution ratio, so for A it's 2P to 3Q. Now what that means is for every 2P that A produces, he has to forego the production of, or he could have produced 3Q. So that's how you would read that substitution ratio. And so Mises sort of takes that as like an equivalence. It's like, oh, well, since based on the labor hours and how many I could produce, 2P is worth 3Q in terms of how long it takes me to produce these things. And then based on that, you can, re-reckon the numbers, and he says it signifies a larger output. But notice the reason why he does that is because, this points. The reason why he does that is because his outcome here is 24P and 60Q, which means that while there is an increase in Q, there's a decrease in P, right? So it's not immediately obvious as to that there has been an increase in total production, but Mises assures us because of the substitution ratios, it signifies a larger output. Okay, so here's my refinement. It's easier to see the gains from trade if you have A partially specialized in Q as opposed to totally specializing. And if you do that using the same production trade-offs, you can get an increase in the production and consumption of both goods after they specialize. Now remember, so we don't lose the importance of this conclusion, the reason Mises is walking through this is to show that A is not dragged down by B's participation in the division of labor. B still has a spot, has a way to contribute to increasing total production, right? So that's the magnificent, wonderful conclusion of this exercise, is to show that no matter your total or your absolute productivity in making things, you still, because of the differences in trade-offs, the differences in opportunity costs and producing different things, you can still contribute to increasing total production and gaining. Everybody can gain from the division of labor. Okay, so how does it work? The law of association says that everybody has a spot in the division of labor. There's your Hallmark card quote. Even those who are less productive. Maybe leave that part out. The reason it works is because the gains from trade come from the differences in production trade-offs, not absolute productivity. So let's look at the differences in production trade-offs, and we'll use, Mises pointed out the substitution ratios, the 2P for 3Q. So I've got this down here. So B has a comparative advantage in P because for A, there's their substitution ratio, 2P to 3Q, and then so that we get 4P in the numerator for both, I'm just going to multiply it, translate it over into 4 divided by 6. So we got 4P to 6Q. This is a smaller fraction to B's substitution ratio of 4 to 5. And so what that means is that it costs A 6Q to make 4P, but for B, it only costs 5Q. And it's that difference in what's foregone, the opportunity cost of producing P, that reveals who is the comparative advantage producer in that thing. All right, so now here's the kicker. So where does the law of association come into play, or how does that work? If you flip the fractions, so turn the 2 over 3 into 3 over 2, and the 4 over 5 into 5 over 4, the inequality sign flips, meaning one person's comparative advantage in producing one good is the other person's comparative advantage in the other good, mathematically, necessarily. The only exception to this is if they have the same production trade-offs. That's the one super unlikely situation. As we'll see, I'll mention later, that sort of situation is very unlikely because of the differences in the distribution of natural resources, capital goods, people learning skills along the way. So like the differences in skills are extended across time. They get more severe over time. As people learn things, as people make specific capital goods, as we discover land that has particular uses, it means that these differences in productivity are going to become more extreme, right? So it's very unlikely that there would be, first of all, that this would occur, that people have equal production trade-offs, but also that would extend across time. So B's comparative advantage in P is, by definition, mathematically, A's comparative advantage in Q. Okay, that's enough math. This is an Austrian conference, right? So why is this so important for Mises? Why did he emphasize the law of association so much and what it means for human civilization? He said the law of association makes us comprehend the tendencies which resulted in the progressive intensification of human cooperation. We conceive what incentive induced people not to consider themselves simply as rivals in a struggle for the appropriation of the limited supply of means of subsistence made available by nature. We realize what has impelled them and permanently impels them to consort with one another for the sake of cooperation. He says, every step forward on the way to a more developed mode of the division of labor serves the interests of all participants. Okay, so how does this work for a monetary economy? We've got Crusoe and Friday with the berries and the coconuts, A and B, P and Q. But how does this work for us in a money-using division of labor? So we don't have just two goods. We don't have just two ways to allocate our labor between two different goods. So how do we figure this out in a complex industrial market economy where there's many opportunities for us to apply our labor? So I could work here, I could work there. How do we figure out where our comparative advantage is? And that's where economic calculation comes in. So this is the other huge idea in human action. The two big ones are the division of labor and economic calculation. And it's got over 800 pages just talking about effectively these two ideas and how they're central to human civilization. Mises said that monetary calculation is the guiding star of action under the social system of division of labor. So there's something about monetary values, prices, incomes, things reckoned in money prices that allow us, that guide us, right, in figuring out how to fit into the division of labor. That's what he's saying there. And the answer is, in more clear terms, is that the prospective monetary income in various employments provides an incentive to each individual to specialize in his comparative advantage. And before I give you an example, just one more quote from Mises where he's pulling together these ideas, economic calculation and the division of labor. He's going through how people criticize these ideas, and he says, other critics of economic calculation fail to realize that it is a method available only to people acting in the economic system of the division of labor in a social order based upon private ownership of the means of production. So there he's connected all of the main ideas here. We have economic calculation, the division of labor, we have also social harmony or social order as well in the form of the institution of private property. So these are all, you can't split them apart. They all work together in a way that provides for the standards of living, the civilization that we witness today. Okay, so here's our example with the employment opportunities. We have Bob, some hypothetical guy. And suppose he has three different ways that he could allocate his labor. He could be a boxer, probably fighting Paul Krugman. You see that picture. He could be an actor in a Marvel film, obviously portraying Captain America. Or he could be a singer. And without market prices, it's not obvious to Bob how he would best economize his labor time. How would he decide to allocate his labor into these three different ones, or should he specialize in one particular one? Without market prices, really the only thing that he has to go on is his own values, right? So like how much utility does he get out of these different activities? What satisfies his own preferences? So one thing that Professor Herbner said in the previous lecture is that market prices reveal to us it gives us some objective evidence about what other people want, right? So this is how entrepreneurs arrange factors of production today in anticipation of what consumers will want in the future. So it's not like they're just guessing consumers will want pencils, therefore I'm going to get the factors of production that are required to make pencils. It's more detailed than that. They need more detail than that. So how many workers should I put in this pencil factory? How many pieces of wood, raw lumber do I need to get to bring into the factory? What color paint should I put on the outside of the pencil? All these specific decisions that need to be made, and you can't just use like intuitive gut feeling guesswork, right? You need specific objective facts, something to look at. And the answer is they anticipate market prices for their product. So they're thinking about how much will I be able to sell each pencil for? What total revenue will I get by producing X number of pencils? And therefore, that gives me the basis to bid specific prices for the factors of production, right? So same thing here with Bob. He has these different employment opportunities that give him different prospective monetary incomes. We'll say, I don't know, you want this to be a month or a year? Really, the period doesn't matter. So suppose he could earn $1,000 being a boxer or $2,000 being an actor in a Marvel movie, but he can earn $5 million by being a singer. Okay, so what do these numbers mean? If these are true, if these are correct anticipations about the market expenditure on the part of consumers for the things that he's producing, either boxing events or Marvel movies or hot singles that go on the Billboard top hits, right? So like whatever he's producing, if these figures accurately represent the revenue that he would get by selling his labor services in these three different areas, it means that it's the market telling him, it's consumers telling him, we value your activity as a singer, the product of your singing labor more than these other things. So if Bob were to choose one of these lower paying jobs, suppose he decides to be a boxer, it means that everybody else in the market, all of the potential consumers of his singing abilities, would lose out a lot. They really value, there are many consumers that value his singing abilities, would pay for concert tickets, would pay for the albums, and so on, right? So if Bob spends his time being a boxer, we all lose out on all the beautiful singing of Bob, right? So notice, like, the way I've phrased that, it's similar to the choices that Crusoe and Friday made in producing coconuts and fish. So, like, why did Crusoe decide to only produce coconuts, even though he did not want 16 coconuts? And the answer is he was thinking about what Friday wants, right? He was anticipating Friday's going to want some of my extra coconuts. When Friday was only producing fish, Friday was thinking Crusoe is going to want some of these fish. I don't want to consume all these fish. I want a variety in my diet. So I'm willing to produce a bunch of this, but I'm expecting to be able to trade. Same thing with Bob here. And the information, the ideas, the values that are reflected in these market prices, these wages or salaries of Bob's labor in these three different tasks. What these prices indicate is, Bob, if you become a boxer, you're not producing what everybody else wants you to produce. So if Crusoe decided not to produce a bunch of coconuts, if he decided not to specialize, then Friday's going to lose out, and Crusoe's going to lose out. So the prices convey that, but also they provide an incentive to do that sort of thing. So it's not like people just wake up one morning with like this, I've discovered what my comparative advantage is. Or maybe like after a bunch of work with a spreadsheet or graph paper, I've figured out based on the slopes of my production possibilities frontiers, I should specialize in teaching economics. Like, no, there's none of that. What happens is the market prices for your labor do that. They provide an incentive for you to go into that line of work in which you are the comparative advantage producer. Okay, we've got a few minutes left to talk about social order. Big topic. Whole libraries of books have been written about this. We'll say a few things or see what Mises said about it. So if the social order is based on private property, it means that economic calculation is possible. And you'll see this spelled out in a later lecture by Joe Salerno, I believe, about socialism and how economic calculation is impossible under socialism. So economic calculation is the use of market prices to reckon in profits and losses. It's to do appraisement, which Professor Herbener mentioned in the previous lecture. And so to have market prices, you need exchange. In order for people to exchange things, you need property. So like one prerequisite for exchange to occur is people have to own the goods which they're exchanging. So without private property, there's no exchange. No exchange means no prices. No prices means no economic calculation. Without economic calculation, then you lose that guiding star that Mises talked about. You lose that ability for people to figure out what is the best way to economize my labor, what factors of production should I put together to produce what I think consumers will want. So that economic calculation is exactly what you need to do that sort of thing. Okay, so if it's based on private property, you get economic calculation. It's possible now. And the full benefits of the division of labor can be extended to all who participate. That's the law of association. If, however, your social order is based on an inhibition of private property, or if it's prohibited, that means that economic calculation is distorted or made impossible, and the benefits of the division of labor are curtailed or even eradicated in the case of, full-on socialism, abolition of private property. So that's the significance of this. Without private property, we lose the ability to do economic calculation. We lose the benefits of the division of labor. Civilization crumbles. Very important. We don't want civilization to crumble. Mises talked about a civilization that crumbled. He talked about the Roman Empire, something that we all think about on a daily basis. He said the marvelous civilization of antiquity perished because it did not adjust its moral code and its legal system to the requirements of the market economy. A social order is doomed if the actions which its normal functioning requires are rejected by the standards of morality, are declared illegal by the laws of the country, and are prosecuted as criminal by the courts and the police. So here is where Mises diagnoses what caused the Roman Empire to collapse. He said the Roman Empire crumbled to dust because it lacked the spirit of liberalism and free enterprise. The policy of interventionism and its political corollary, the Führer principle, decomposed the mighty empire as they will by necessity always disintegrate and destroy any social entity. Now, this is something that hopefully we won't witness in our lifetimes with like the countries in which we live. However, we do get little pictures of this happening. And a great picture of this happening is in the summer of 2020. People, sometimes speakers up here will refer to a year and they'll say, you guys probably weren't even born yet, but I'm sure all of you were alive during 2020. If you remember, there was a lot of social unrest, arson, vandalism, property theft. But what immediately preceded that? And of course, it was the declaration of the COVID pandemic and the response, especially the response of governments to lock down, to prevent people from going to work. And only the people who were declared essential workers were allowed to keep working, at least in the United States, right? That's how it worked. It's like only essential workers. But as we saw in the ham sandwich model, everybody's essential, right? It's like you can't just like pluck a few people out of that and say, okay, we're just going to let our economy run on just a few people, right? It doesn't work like that. First of all, it's too complex to do that. Second of all, it requires the cooperation of many stages of production. You can't just have one stage of production continue, even if that one is declared essential. You can't just have that one continue without other things working, other things operating in the market economy. So we had a breakdown in the division of labor instituted by government intervention, and we immediately saw collapse of culture, collapse of peaceful cooperation, right? So you see pictures of this, right? So thankfully we recovered from that somewhat. But the point is, like, whenever there's a severe curtailment of people's ability to participate in a division of labor, you're going to witness these sorts of things that Mises is talking about. You're going to see peaceful society go away. You're going to see civilization go away. And in fact, the way Mises ends the whole book, and this helps prove my point that the division of labor, peaceful cooperation, economic calculation are so important for Mises and human action. The way that he ends the whole book is he basically says, if you ignore this stuff that I've been writing about, if you ignore the greater productivity of the division of labor, all of the laws of economics that I've highlighted in this book, speaking as Mises, if you ignore all of this that I've written, it's going to be bad for you, right? The society itself will crumble, civilization will crumble. He says at the very end, but if they fail to take the best advantage of it and disregard its teachings and warnings, they will not annul economics, they will stamp out society and the human race. So I think that we should follow Mises' advice and study economics. Thanks. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Newman.
This goes to the first slide. Are institutions only for protecting property rights, institutions like the family or the church, or do they have some further purpose?
So the institutions that Mises was talking about is in regards to their is in regards to property rights and whether they're upheld, whether business owners, entrepreneurs expect that they will be enforced. But however, Mises does talk about the family and like community groups and those sorts of things, and how those are also like social organizations where people are helping each other out, also helping to enforce certain codes of ethics, right? So that's mentioned. But for the purposes of this topic, when Mises is talking about social harmony or the harmony of interests, he's really talking about a broader social nexus that's made possible by division of labor, that's made possible by economic calculation, that's made possible by respect for property rights. Yeah.
Hi, you mentioned at the end how no private property in a society leads to the corruption of the division of labor, and then further the corruption of trade in general. Would you say in order to, obviously prevent from that corruption and keep private property intact, do you think some sort of governance is required in order to maintain that?
You're asking if I'm an anarcho-capitalist, right? Yeah, yes, I think that the private production of law and defense can occur, and this would be the best way for it to happen. However, Mises often wrote, and also Hazlitt wrote about the requirement for government to do the bare minimum, and for them the bare minimum was police and courts, right, to uphold private property. But yeah, I'm in the Rothbardian camp. But the reason I mentioned Mises and Hazlitt is that there's a variety of perspectives among Mises faculty. All right, thanks everyone.